Day 107 of the war in Gaza. Slow progress is being made in the Hamas stronghold of Khan Younis, with the IDF limited to low-intensity combat due to areas of high-density civilian population in the south of the Gaza Strip. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Day 107 of the war against Hamas has Israeli forces moving further into southern Gaza. After weeks of airstrikes and close combat fighting in the Hamas stronghold of Khan Younis, IDF troops are approaching areas crowded with more than 1 million people taking refuge from the destruction elsewhere in Gaza. Prospects of a major push into densely populated and vulnerable population have forced IDF actions to be slow and targeted. Soldiers from the 55th Brigade uncovered and destroyed additional rocket launchers and terror infrastructure in the southern Gaza city after clashes with the Eastern Battalion of Hamas's Khan Younis Brigade. Israeli and U.S. views reportedly differ on how far along the IDF effort is toward the defeat of Hamas in Gaza. The Wall Street Journal quotes U.S. intelligence saying that only 30% of Hamas terrorists have been eliminated since the beginning of the war. Those same officials say that Hamas has the military capabilities to continue the war for months to come, while trying to renew its presence in parts of Gaza City. This is quite different from the overview that was given by Prime Minister Netanyahu.
יש שני שלבים בלחימה. אחד זה בעצם זה השמדת הגדודים של החמאס, זה מסגרות הלחימה המאורגנות שלהם. עד היום הושמדו 16-17 גדודים מתוך 24, ואחר כך יש לך עדיין טיהור השטח. שני הדברים, הפעולה הראשונה בדרך כלל יותר קצרה, הפעולה השנייה יותר ארוכה, ואנחנו עוסקים בשני הדברים גם יחד.
Netanyahu does agree with the reported American assessment that it will still take some time for Hamas to be defeated, but insists that time will come.
לא נתפשר על פחות מניצחון מוחלט. ניצחון מוחלט מחייב את חיסול ראשי הטרור והשמדת היכולות הצבאיות והשלטוניות של החמאס. ניצחון מוחלט מחייב את השבת חטופינו הביתה. ניצחון מוחלט מחייב שעזה תהיה מפורזת בשליטה ביטחונית מלאה של ישראל, ושליטה ישראלית על כל מה שנכנס לעזה.
Day 107 of the war in Gaza, the Prime Minister insists Israeli war goals remain unchanged.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
Well, one of the key challenges for Israel in this war has been the battle for Israel's legitimacy due to the rapid increase in anti-Semitism and, of course, heightened scrutiny on exclusively the Jewish state. Hanania Naftali has been a warrior for Israel both on and off the battlefield and joins us today to speak about the challenges Israel's facing in the coming months of this war. Hanania, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's good to be here.
Now, you've been a fighter in the IDF and also, of course, in the digital space. I wanted to hear from you, how long do you think it will take Israel to effectively eliminate Hamas? I mean, we're in the thick of things right now. How is it going?
Absolutely. So there were reports that the IDF has eliminated thousands of terrorists, about 9,000 as reported lately by the Wall Street Journal. But the debate, as mentioned earlier, that it's not enough. It's between 20 to 30%. And the question is, how come the IDF, one of the most powerful armies in the Middle East, has only eliminated 30%? Now, to answer that, it's actually very simple. As someone who served in the Israel Defense Forces myself, we do everything in our power to only target terrorists, not civilians. But Hamas, on the other hand, he's doing exactly the opposite. He is hiding among civilians while targeting Israeli civilians, committing a double war crime. So that has been a challenge for the Israel Defense Forces to only target Hamas terrorists. That is the mission.
Now, you've been very active in telling Israel's side of the story, both as a soldier and also as a private citizen, as an activist on social media. And you yourself have been in situations in which the IDF has gone out of their way to protect or avoid civilian casualties, as you just referred to. What is the difference between what you've seen on the ground as a soldier, including in Gaza yourself, and what we're seeing reported on social media about Israel's conduct?
Well, it's quite preposterous, because I have to say, let's start from the top. Like you said, the mainstream media is reporting wrongfully about what Israel is doing. But as someone who served in the Israel Defense Forces, I'm going to shock the viewers, because actually the first thing that you're getting from on your first day in the Israeli army is this thing called the IDF Code of Ethics. This is the first thing that you're getting on your first day in the Israel Defense Forces, and I got this. You're taught about human rights, you're taught about conduct of arms, how to protect your country, and only then you're taught actually physically how to defend it. So I think it's quite ridiculous, because as someone who served in the Israel Defense Forces, I was taught to do my best to only protect my country, not at the cost of Palestinian civilians. So actually, as someone who was also a combat medic, I took an oath to treat everybody. And 99% of the people that I've treated were actually Palestinians and Syrians and not Israelis. So there you go. This is the true face of the Israel Defense Forces.
And this is something that we're not really hearing very much about on the mainstream media, in the international press. Why do you think that is? Why aren't these stories of the IDF calling off strikes in order to avoid civilian casualties, why aren't these stories being told? I know it's something you focus on in your content.
It has become fashion to hate Israel, but it's really not Israel. It's about hating Jewish people. I had the conversation with an Arab friend of mine who actually immigrated from Gaza to Israel, converted from Islam to Judaism, and he said, look, even if the Jews left Israel, left Jerusalem, went to Europe, they would chase us down to Europe and they would slaughter us, because it's a problem with the Jews. It's not just with Israel. And unfortunately, we live in a world where mainstream media does not care about news. They care about political agenda. We live in a world where human rights organizations are led by interests and not by justice. So it's just hypocrisy. If you want to know the true nature of Hamas, if you want to know the true nature of radical Islam, don't ask us, the Israelis. Actually, ask the Iranian people. They will tell you very well about the true nature and the true threat, not just to Israel, but to humanity.
Well, they actually bring up an interesting point. Now we're talking about Iran. Obviously, Iran has been a huge issue throughout this conflict. I'm wondering, based on what you've seen online and in person, the Islamic Republic is heavily involved in the PR war as well as the actual war through their proxies. Where do you see this conflict going, and what's it going to take for the Iranian regime to really be shut down, whether it's through their proxies in the northern border, Hezbollah and IRGC bases, or Hamas in Gaza, or the regime itself?
Exactly right. You see that now the Islamic regime in Iran, they are the head of the snake, as said by Iranian people. They call Israel the little Satan, the United States the big Satan. But actually, if you ask the Iranian people, they will tell you who the real Satan is. They have been funding Hamas, training Hamas terrorists, and also providing them with the knowledge to manufacture their own rockets, to launch them at civilians from civilian neighborhoods. So they just sponsor hatred, terrorism, and the Middle East will be a better place without the radical Islamic regime in Iran that is causing 99% of the problems that we are seeing. If you ask, again, the Iranian people, they will tell you that Israel is not the source of the problem, but actually a problem solver.
Mm-hmm. Well, when it comes to human rights violations, we know there have been recent reports about Iran, breaking records for executions even in 2024 so far. This is the same type of disregard for human life we see from these terrorist proxies, be it the Houthis or Hamas. Is that in line with what you saw as a soldier on the ground in terms of how Palestinian leaders treat their own people?
Precisely. I mean, when you're actually on the ground, it's not like you see people wearing, regime uniforms, but you really see very clearly that they are using Palestinian civilians. Hamas wants civilian casualties because they just use it as propaganda that we are targeting civilians. But actually on the ground, you are commanded, not requested, not recommended, commanded to only target Hamas terrorists and not to target civilians. actually talking about what's going on social media, you see that the people that hate Israel, they don't do this because they care for Palestinians. They simply hate the Jewish state. When I, an Israeli who served in the Israel Defense Forces, defend Israel, I do it out of love for my country, not hate for Palestinians. As an Israeli, I love Palestinian people and I wish peace for them.
Well, thank you, Hanania. We are out of time, but thank you so much for this insight. Definitely interesting developments both on the ground and online. Thank you for what you do. The IDF has made disturbing discoveries in Gaza in the Hamas terror tunnel system in Khan Younis. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
IDF troops in Khan Younis have found a tunnel where hostages were held in the Gaza Strip after the October 7th massacre. The tunnel, which had an entrance inside the home of a Hamas terrorist, was 830 meters long and 20 meters deep and situated in a civilian neighborhood.
המנהרה רושתה במטענים ובדלתות הדף שנועדו להגן על המחבלים ולמנוע התקדמות של חטופינו. כמובן שהגענו, בתוך המנהרה הזאת לא היו חטופים, אלא שהו בחטופים בעבר.
Inside the tunnel, troops found a room where dozens of hostages had been held behind bars without daylight and with little ventilation.
לפי העדויות שבידינו, במנהרה הזו הוחזקו כ-20 חטופים בזמנים שונים, בתנאים קשים, ללא אור יום, באוויר צפוף, מעט חמצן ולחות נוראית שמקשה על הנשימה.
Evidence of drawings made by 5-year-old hostage Amelia Aloni, who was held for over 50 days by Hamas and has since been released, was also found. The evidence gathered from troops on the ground proves Hamas is engaging in crimes against humanity, including children, with the inhumane conditions innocent hostages are held under in the Gaza Strip.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
Tehran is vowing revenge after an attack attributed to Israel flattened a building in Damascus used as a base for the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, killing 5, including a top general. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
5 Iranian Revolutionary Guards were killed in the weekend attack, along with an unnamed number of Syrian troops. The multi-story building was used by Iranian advisors supporting the Assad government and was destroyed by precision-targeted missiles. The casualties included the Revolutionary Guard's Syrian intel chief, his deputy, and 3 other Guard members. There was no confirmation from Israel, which rarely comments on alleged strikes in Syria. Noor News identified the dead intelligence chief as General Sadeh Omidzadeh. Iranian TV presented a message from President Raisi vowing revenge. Recent weeks have seen several alleged sorties carried out against sites in Syria as part of Israel's ongoing efforts to prevent Iran from supplying arms to its proxy Hezbollah, which has launched daily attacks on northern Israel over the past several months amid the ongoing war in Gaza. Defense Minister Gallant reportedly told his American counterpart, Lloyd Austin, that Israel was nearing a decision point on expanding military action against Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Well, as tensions continue to escalate with the regime in Iran, the Northern Front has also continued to see an increase in fighting from Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah. Experts around the world are watching closely to see how the war progresses and if Israel will be forced to launch a larger-scale military operation in Lebanon or even Syria. Now, here to discuss the current situation is Dr. Mordechai Kedar, an expert on the Middle East from Bar-Ilan University. Dr. Kedar, thank you for joining us. I'll cut right to the chase. Are we headed towards an all-out war with Hezbollah?
Well, I'm not a future teller. I don't know what Hezbollah is planning, and Iranians, of course, as well. Yet, I'm more than sure that Hezbollah will not start a war by itself, as Hamas did on October 7th, because Hezbollah is much more binded to the Iranian orders And Iran at this point does not want to start a war with Israel because Iran has not yet acquired a nuclear weapon. And Iran does not want to bear the consequences of an all-out war against Israel. This is why at this point, in my humble view, Iran is not ready yet to launch a multi-front attack on Israel from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. Hamas, which was supposed to be part of this all-out war against Israel, actually exhausted its abilities in this war, which was arranged by Hamas without the consent of the Iranians and Hezbollah.
Now, after yesterday's strike on the IRGC commanders in Syria, what can we expect to see from Tehran, and where is this proxy war of the Iranian regime headed with, conflict with the Houthis in Yemen, with the West, conflict on the border with Hezbollah, and of course now Syria from yesterday?
Well, Iran actually acts according to the verse in the Quran, "In Allah ma'as-sabirin," means that Allah is with those who have patience. And they have patience at this time, as I mentioned. They do not want to wage an all-out war against Israel because the situation in the world doesn't fit it. The situation in Israel is now at war, so Israel is, all the reserve forces are recruited. So Iran wants to catch us by surprise, not when Israel has all the reservists serving in the army. So at this point, it's not good for them to start a war. Yet, apparently, if Israel will strike in a way which they cannot tolerate, they might, retaliate with a much bigger scale of clashes with Israel. Yet, there are all kinds of degrees of war. Between an all-out war and border clashes, there are some stations.
Now, this strike in Syria came as the U.S. and allies are finally striking the Houthis in the Red Sea, though many of these strikes have reportedly not been very effective. How should Western allies be responding to the proxy terror groups harming both Israeli and American targets across the region?
Well, since all these organizations in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, and of course Hamas as well, since they are all the tentacles of the Iranian octopus, I think that finally the ultimate way how to calm the situation is to target the head of the octopus, means to target Iran. Iran actually filled the Middle East with organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, and others in Syria and Iraq and Yemen. Why organizations and not states? Because organizations are not bound to international law. They can do whatever they like without being responsible in front of the United Nations, Security Council, and all kinds of other international devices. Israel is bound because Israel is a state. So Israel cannot retaliate in a way which they do because Israel is not an organization. Israel is a state. So this is the satanic way of conduct of the Iranians. Yet the world can act against Iran because everybody knows who is behind the weapons, the ammunition, the training, the equipment, and the encouragement and the politics behind all these organizations, which actually devastate the Middle East. Look what Hamas is doing. Look what Hezbollah is doing to Lebanon. What did Hezbollah do to the people in Syria like 4 or 5 years ago? How many people were butchered in Syria by Hezbollah? Look at what happens in Iraq when all the proxies of Iran are actually devastating the state of Iraq. What happens with the Houthis? So what I mean is that there is a long list of claims against Iran, and definitely the Iranian regime deserves a big hit from the countries which are suffering from this regime and beyond, because they are trying to undermine the international order and the international law. international conventions, like free shipping, in the open seas. They are against it. You know what? They became pirates.
Yep.
Pirates, really. What the world succeeded to get rid of in Somalia, in the previous centuries. Now
Dr.
again,
Kedar,
we have
Dr.
the
Kedar.
Iranian pirates.
I wish we had more time, but unfortunately we are actually out of time, although I could listen to you all day on this topic because I know you have a wealth of information that our viewers really do need to hear. But thank you so much for joining us today and as always for all of the work that you're doing.
Pleasure and honor.
Thank you. Prime Minister Netanyahu is pushing back on reports he told President Biden he isn't ruling out the emergence of a Palestinian state as part of the solution after the war with Hamas in Gaza. This after U.S. President Biden claimed that the Israeli leader does not rule out a two-state solution if the future Palestinian entity was demilitarized. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Differences of opinion came into public view after a phone between U.S. President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu on the potential emergence of a Palestinian state as part of the solution for ending the war with Hamas. Netanyahu issued this clarification.
ולכן אני מבהיר, בכל הסדר בעתיד הנראה לעין, עם הסדר, בלי הסדר, מדינת ישראל חייבת לשלוט ביטחונית על כל השטח מערבית לירדן. זה תנאי הכרחי. וזה מתנגש עם רעיון הריבונות, מה לעשות?
The comments came after President Biden had indicated that the Israeli leader may accept some type of a two-state solution with a demilitarized Palestinian entity.
What do you think about conditions on Israel aid, given what Netanyahu said about a one state?
I think we'll be able to work something out.
What does that mean?
There are a number of types of two-state solutions. There's a number of countries that are members of the UN that are still don't have their own military. A number of states that have limitations on it. And so I think there's ways in which this could work.
But Bibi has said he's opposed.
No, he didn't say no, he didn't say that.
So what is he open to?
I'll let you know.
Did you talk about it this morning?
Netanyahu confirmed that Washington and Jerusalem do not always see eye to eye. But when it comes to Israeli security, it's the Prime Minister that must decide.
את האמת הזאת אני אומר לידידינו האמריקנים, ואני גם בלבתי את הניסיון לכפות עלינו מציאות שתפגע בביטחון ישראל. ראש ממשלה בישראל צריך להיות מסוגל להגיד לא גם לטובי הידידים שלנו, להגיד לא כשצריך, ולהגיד כן שאפשר.
Tens of thousands of people across the country took part in rallies in Israel to bring attention to the continuing plight of the 136 hostages still held in Hamas captivity in Gaza since October 7th. More from ILTV's William Sharon.
After 107 days, all of Israel wants the hostages that are still held in Hamas captivity to be released, and they want it now. Hamas has rejected recent efforts from Qatari mediators, and it's been nearly 2 months since the first and so far only hostage deal. Rallies were held with families of the 136 hostages, joined by many who have taken to heart the fate of the captives, demanding their freedom before it's too late.
We know that they are alive, their family knows they are alive, but that was when the first hostages came back to Israel. And, since then it's been almost 2 months, I think.
Demonstrators held simultaneous rallies in Tel Aviv, Caesarea, and Jerusalem on Saturday evening to pressure the government to do its maximum and to keep their plight on the world's agenda.
The only win is when they 36 people, innocent people, children, adults, old people, young people, unfortunately also dead people that killed there. So it's terrible. It's terrible for us as a family. It's terrible. It's a nightmare.
A nightmare for the families and for all the people of Israel.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 12 degrees Celsius or 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, partly cloudy skies and steady rising temperatures expected to reach highs of around 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, iltv.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.